so now the final part is some example problems, like the ones you're going to have on your homework. I'm going to put the steps over here, and then I'm just going to go ahead and work them out over here on your notes. That way I have a little bit more room to work. Okay, so when I say simplify these expressions, there's a few things that you need to make sure that you do. The first thing is that you need to make sure there's no exponents outside parentheses. So you want to get rid of the parentheses. So again, you distribute the exponent to everything in the parentheses, if there are any. Okay, so looking at A and B, we actually don't have to worry about that one because there's not an exponent on the outside of the parentheses. So like if there was a squared here and a cube there, we would need to get rid of those first. But these don't have them, so we can skip that step. And then we need to make sure that each variable appears exactly once. So it's kind of like we're combining like terms. All right, so over here, because everything is multiplication, multiplying the parentheses, multiplying the numbers and the x and the y, and the coefficients and the x and the y, we can actually rearrange it so that all our like things are together. So I'm going to group them and put my numbers together and multiply. So 2 times -7. And then I'm going to group it to put my x's together. X -3 times x to the 5th. And then group my y's together. Y cubed times y to the -6. So I want to combine these so I don't have any, so I have one of each. So one number, 2 times -7 is -14. Combine my x's together. When I combine here, we're multiplying with the same base. When we multiply with the same base, we add the exponents. So -3 plus 5 is 2. And then the y's the same thing. I combine my y's together by adding the exponents. So 3 plus -6 is -3. Okay, so there's no parentheses. Parentheses are gone. I have one of each thing, one number, one x, one y. And then I need to reduce fractions and make sure there's no negative exponents. So here, I don't have any fractions, so I can skip that step for now. But I do have negative exponents. The one that has the negative exponent is the y here. So -14 is not a negative exponent. -14 is just the number. So the -14 is going to stay. The x squared is going to stay. But for the y cubed, remember when the exponent's negative, I use the reciprocal and I make it a fraction. So I'm going to make this 1 over y to the +3. However, we don't leave our final answer like this because right here, they're reduced, but we got to combine them together. So we need to combine this into just one final answer in the end. So I'm going to go ahead and write this one over here because I'm kind of running out of space. So when I combine this, so this is like over 1. I combine everything in the numerator together. I multiply all of that. So I get -14 x squared over, I combine everything in the denominator, and here 1 times y cubed is just y cubed. I guess I could have just wrote it right here, it's not a lot. So y cubed goes in the bottom, and the -14 x squared stays in the numerator. So this is actually more work than I need you to show. Here I'm walking through every single step, but you can actually combine some of these steps together. So for part D, go ahead and work out part D, pause it for a little bit, work it out, and then I'm going to show you the parts that you have to show when you work these out. But yes, there's a lot of steps that you can skip. It's not going to take you this much work. All right, so example D here is pretty much the same thing. Instead of regrouping them, kind of like I did on example A, you can just group them from here. So here, group all your numbers together. Oops, I don't want to do that. So here my coefficient is 2 and 3, and this one doesn't have one. So I'm going to multiply those, because this is all multiplication. So that's going to be 6. And then you group your A's together. So A squared, A cubed, and that's it. There's no other A's. So here, it's like I grouped these together. I'm going to add these exponents. So A negative 2 plus 3 is just 1, positive 1. And then group the B's together. Well, this is the only B, so this comes down. And this is the only C, so this one comes down. C negative 2. Okay, so again, you can eliminate this regrouping step. You don't have to do that one if you can kind of just group them in your head from the original problem. So then we're right here at this step. So you don't actually have to do this one. You can go straight into just giving me the answer if you know which ones stay in the numerator and which ones go to the denominator. So again, we can't have any negative exponents. So the one with the negative exponent is the C. So that one's going to do the reciprocal, which means it's going to go to the bottom. So C is going to go on the bottom, and the negative 2 is going to become positive, squared. But all of these other ones have positive exponents. So the 6 stays on the top. The A to the 1 is positive, so that stays on the top, which that's just A. You don't need the 1. And B has a positive exponent, so that one just stays here, B squared. So that would be your final answer for this one. So again, the combining like terms part and the reciprocal part you don't have to do, but make sure you, at the end, you at least put them in the top and the bottom where they're supposed to go. So you're just really looking at the exponents. Okay, so that is the product property where we're adding the exponents. And now we go to the quotient property where we're dividing these things. All right, so again, I'll do the little checklist on the right here and work it out on the notes. So for number B, again, if there was parentheses with an exponent on the outside, you would get rid of those first. So if it had this, you would need to apply or distribute that exponent to everything. It doesn't have anything like that, so I'm going to skip that step and go straight into combining my variables together. So again, I'm going to write it combined together, but in the end you really don't have to do this part. So I'm going to combine this fraction together, 15 over negative 3, and then I'm going to combine this fraction together, c to the 5th over c squared, and the d's. So if they're not in order, then this step would be to put them in order. Combine your variables together. And now I actually do the fraction parts. So I want to reduce the fractions and combine them so that I only have one of each. So here, 15 divided by negative 3 is negative 5. For the quotient property, when I'm dividing with the same base, I subtract the exponents. So 5 minus 2 is 3. And then for D, we subtract again. 3 minus 7 is negative 4. So we've combined them. There's no parentheses. We've combined the x's, the c's, the d's, and the numbers. We reduced the fraction. Now we just have to get rid of the negative exponent. So I'm not going to write it in reciprocal form. I'm just going to flip it around. So just like we did on the last problem, The one with the negative exponent is d, so that's the one that's going to go to the bottom. So d goes to the denominator, and it becomes a positive 4. 5 doesn't flip because 5 is not a negative exponent. 5 is just a negative number. It's okay for the number to be negative. The exponent can't be negative. So the negative 5 stays, and the c cubed stays, because those are positive exponents. Alright, so again, this is the part you really don't need to show. You can combine it from the actual problem. Just make sure you're looking at the variables that are the same. So again, try E, pause it, try E, and then play it and we'll work it out. Okay, so combining my Q's together. Let me see if I can circle the Q's. I'm going to do 2 minus 7 is negative 5. That's a Q. And then I combine my R's together. So here R, 4 minus 3 is 1. And then the S's. This one you got to be careful with, the negatives. So you're always subtracting. Negative 2 minus, there's a 1 here, 1 is negative 3. So be careful with the negatives. If there's a negative on the bottom, it's actually a positive because you're going to subtract a negative number and then it becomes positive. Okay, so that's combining our like terms. And then we have to flip them around. So the negative ones go to the bottom. So Q has a negative 5 on it. So it goes here. And the exponent becomes a positive. And then the S also has a negative exponent, so that one goes to the bottom, and it becomes a positive 3. The R has a positive 1 as the exponent, so that one stays in the numerator. You can write the 1 there, but you don't have to. The answer choice is not going to put a 1 there. It's just going to leave it alone. Alright, so that would be the final answer for this one. So, typing in those missing exponents, I think is what you have to do on the form and then on the homework. Alright, and then last one is the power rule. So again, the three important ones are product, quotient, and power. But within those, we have to use our distributing property, and we have to use our negative exponent property, and maybe the zero property. But the three important ones are the ones you'll see most often, which is the adding, subtracting, and then multiplying. Okay, so here this time is where we do have the parentheses and an exponent on the outside. So what we have to do is we have to apply that exponent to everything inside the parentheses. So you apply it to the coefficient, to the number, negative 2 to the negative 5, and then you apply it to each of the variables. So to the x cubed, we're going to put it to the negative 5, and then to the y squared, we make it go to the negative 5. So for the variable parts, the rule for a power to a power, when I have exponents right next to each other, I multiply them and get negative 10 here, and multiply these two and get negative 15 there. So for this one, for the number, we actually have to get that number. So let's think about what this part means. So the negative means it's going to be 1 over negative 2 to the 5th. So that's what we have to go figure out, what that number is. So I'm going to come over here to Desmos. Where's my Desmos at? And I don't need all these other ones anymore. I'm just going to do negative 2 to the 5th and get negative 32. So that's the number I'm actually going to write when I do this one. So let's write our final answer over here. the negative exponents go on the bottom. So this one's a negative exponent, so it's going to go to the denominator and become a positive 10. This one has a negative exponent, so it also goes to the denominator and becomes a positive 15. And then this one, it's already in the denominator because it was negative, but this number is the negative 32. Alright, so everything, because everything had a negative exponent on it, everything is on the bottom. So then what's left on the top, we can't just leave it blank. If everything goes to the bottom, then the 1 is left in the numerator. Because everything becomes a fraction, so everything goes to the denominator, just a 1 is left in the numerator. Alright, so that would be your final answer for this one. All like terms, no parentheses, all the variables are combined to 1, and then our fraction doesn't have any negative exponents in it. Alright, so do the same thing for f with the quotient. Okay, so we're going to apply the 3 to everything here. We'll apply it to the negative 2. So I'm actually, this part I'll write out, negative 2 to the third. But then for the other ones, I'm just going to go ahead and apply the property. So here, when I apply that exponent to the a, I'm going to multiply those together. A, 4 times 3 is 12. And then I also apply it to the b in the denominator and multiply 3 times 2 is 6. Alright, so we don't have any negative exponents this time, so we don't have to worry about flipping anything around. But I do need to get this number here, negative 2 to the third power. If you don't know what that is, you can come type it in. Make sure you do put parentheses around it. Otherwise, it's not going to give you the correct one sometimes. Alright, so then we get negative 8. So then that part's negative 8. Oopsies. Didn't want to do that. So negative 8 is the coefficient. This one's a positive number, so it's going to stay. This one's a positive number, so it's going to stay. It only flips if it's a negative. So for example, if this would have been a negative 6, it would have actually flipped to the top because it's already in the bottom. If it's on the top to begin with, then it goes to the bottom. So like these are in numerators because there's no fractions. That's why they go to the bottom. But if it's on the bottom already, then you don't have to worry about flipping anything. Alright, so that would be the final answer for this one. Alright, so those are the 3 main properties. Again, using all those other properties within it, the distributing, the negatives. We haven't had any zeros, but if it's 0, it's easy because it just goes away. You can just ignore it. Alright.